Avtar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Right. So let's start with my wish.
Okay, Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. My wish. The lover has to keep the wish of the beloved. My wish for my lovers is as follows. 1. Do not shirk your responsibilities. 2. Attend faithfully to your worldly duties, but always keep at the back of your mind that all this is Baba's. 3. When you feel happy, think, Baba wants me to be happy. When you suffer, think, Baba wants me to suffer. 4. Be resigned to every situation and think honestly and sincerely. Baba has placed me in this situation. 5. With the understanding that Baba is in everyone, try to help and serve others. 6. I say with my divine authority to each and all that whosoever takes my name at the time of breathing his last comes to me. So do not forget to remember me in your last moments. Unless you start remembering me from now on, it will be difficult to remember me when your end approaches. You should start practicing from now on. Even if you take my name only once every day, you will not forget to remember me in your dying moments. Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai.
Avtar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Thank you so much. So
Welcome. I like the opportunity. And just one thing, which comes out from the past several readings is that, uh, Jean Adriel's husband had to close down his shop in New York. So Baba, if these my wish, it says if Baba makes you suffer, it is his wish. So it's all divine intervention. Whatever happens in your life, it's for a reason.
absolutely. So I wanted to I just let you know that one-on-one I've sent you the ebook link on Telegram in response to what you were asking before we started recording. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about that offline. So
Okay.
basically now we are down to I think the last session because we have done 12 sessions of reading Avatar. This is session number 13, 13 lucky for some. So we start with the read. We have about 20, 25 pages. I think we would do well to wrap this up today. But it's been a lovely journey reading reading Baba's life and her experiences as well through her eyes, through her lovely literary skills and her heart and her openness to share exactly what is going through her mind, right? And obviously, it's a book, part biography, which is written before Baba dropped his body. But it's given us a good glimpse of how a Westerner thinks of Baba, right? Not even thinks is a very low end word. You know what I mean.
Absolutely. It is really insightful and with a lot of anecdotes which you don't get to see in other, otherwise you wouldn't have known many of the small, intricate details.
Hmm. So we are in page 271, and we are starting with a section spiritual huntsman. So I could read first, or you could read first. You sometimes have to leave earlier. So if you want, you can start first, Ashok.
I'll start,
Please, Jai Baba.
Jai, Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. Spiritual huntsman. On Baba's return to India from Europe, he focused most of his outer attention upon those men whom he calls the God man. Discover these souls and then persuade them to submit themselves to his compassionate ministrations was the chief purpose of the extensive journey all over India, which occupied much of his time from December 1938 until December 1945. In words
That's the
recently, sorry,
that's
sorry.
the sorry, that's the entire Wayfarers playlist, right? So if
Yes,
somebody wants to know what happened in that period, just go to our channel, read Wayfarers with us, and you'll know exactly what happened from December 1938 to December 1945. In fact, a little more than that, through the eyes of William Dawkins, right? So anyway,
yes,
you were saying something.
the same thought came to my mind. I thought I'll wait till the end of the page, but it's good you brought it up. And 1938 seems to be a very uh, significant milestone year, because that's when this, in August 1938, that's when this building was made in Mehrabad, the one in which uh, adjacent to the Samadhi. So
Meher
1938,
Retreat. Yeah,
Meher
that's the
Retreat.
Meher Retreat building. That's a good point. It has the letters 1938 on it. You're right. I'm not sure if the building was built then, but I think it was complete. The tower was put up then because it was an older tank building. It was a
Okay.
tank. It was a water tank. I think that's a good point. I didn't think of that at all. But what I was thinking was the Bairamangala Center, which opened in 1939, and of course the war. So if you look at 1938 to 1945, a historian instantly will connect the World War II, right? 1939 to 1945 is literally the war, right?
Yes.
So,
And,
yeah,
and war is the extreme aggressive manifestation of our individual egos. It's a very, I mean, uh, it's got some
beautiful,
spiritual.
beautiful
Sorry.
expression. Yeah, perfect.
And believe me or not, whether it's telepathy or I was thinking about the same thing about the Second World War.
Okay, great. Jai
But
Baba.
I thought you completed instead of. But it is good. This exchange of thoughts is really splendid. Continuing in word recently received from India, Baba had further elucidated the object of his work with these souls. It has been this. It has been his purpose not only to balance their consciousness, but to awaken them to the wider responsibility which they assume in the stupendous task of universal quickening. During his stay at Hyderabad alone, he contacted 125 of these God intoxicated souls and many hundreds in other parts of India. By the way, these God intoxicated souls, or some of them or all of them, were also involved in the orchestration or the different parts of the World War.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It is by no means an easy task to induce these individuals absorbed in their beatific vision to depart even for a brief time from their chosen seat or headquarters where, in many cases, they had lived for years. Had Baba himself contacted these souls directly, the task would have been relatively simple. Being peculiarly responsive to spiritual vibrations, they would instantly have felt the divine love which emanates from him and willingly have yielded to his direction as they all did once they came into his presence. But that was not Baba's method. He delegated certain of his disciples for this task, and often their ingenuity was taxed to the utmost in trying to find ways and means of persuading these God intoxicated beings to follow them. Their task was rendered even more complex by the fact that Baba wished his identity undisclosed. Often crowds would gather around the disciples, curious to know why decently clad men were so anxious to take with them the derelicts in rags, which most of them must appear to be. The mention of Baba's name in most cases would not only have struck a responsive chord in the hearts of the God mad, but would also inevitably have drawn to Baba the usual crowds seeking blessing from the Master. It's phenomenal magnetism.
Yes.
Sometimes among these people were those who knew the God intoxicated man and revered him as a spiritual guide. They would then become aggressive as they would try to prevent Baba's disciples from taking their holy man away from them. All these, at all costs, a public row had to be avoided. Yet Baba's men must accomplish their master's orders. It was a delicate undertaking requiring the utmost in patience, perseverance, and skill. But in the end, the disciples would achieve their mission. One of these God intoxicated men was worshipped by thousands as a saint. Baba confirmed his spiritual status. He was brought to the master by a tipsy Tongawala, a cabman, whom the disciples had requisited to help them in their work of gathering up holy men. This particular day's soul was of the mild type, resisting or hesitating only if the order in some way conflicted with the higher consciousness in which he was absorbed. When these souls are lost in their spiritual ecstasies, they feel greatly disturbed and often cry. If told to do something which pulls their consciousness down to earth, those who are less advanced will use cruder methods to express their displeasure, such as Mahmud did when he spat in the face of the Indian disciple in Europe. It is for this reason that Baba, considerate of their delicate psychic mechanism, strictly orders that no coercion or force of any kind is ever to be used with them. The disciples are instructed to watch over them and serve them in all patience, just as Baba himself does. If for any reason they are obdurate, Baba sits quietly waiting until, of their own accord, they signal their willingness for him to continue his services. Another when Another one, when brought to Baba, sang in his ecstasy. I gave my heart to one, but that one disappeared. I have searched him for all these years. Now I have found him. I have found him here today. Later he sang, to love is no easy task. Love is for those who are heroes, who have courage, patience, who can suffer. Love is the real thing. After After days of persuasion by one of Baba's disciples, a woman saint finally consented to be led to Baba. She was very reticent. Only once did she give expression to her feelings after she had been staring fixedly at Baba for many minutes. Why don't you let me have just a few drops of water from the ocean of divinity that you are? She pleaded. Another of the many who gave vent to their spiritual emotions was a Mohammedan who, lovingly touched by Baba, cried out, my heart is intensely burning. You set me aflame, indicating the fire of divine love which the Master had kindled in his heart. Later, he was being fed by the Master. Someone asked him where he was and at whose hands he was being fed. I came to the court of Allah, he replied, and ate my food at his palace. HNP are in capital. Many other were the expressions of ecstasy and recognition of Baba's spiritual eminence on the part of these lovers of God. One who saw him as he was driving with some of his disciples through the streets of Ajmer shouted in great joy, look, Shankar, a Hindu incarnation of God, is here. Hurry, run, hurry, receive God's blessings. Once in Panchgani, an advanced soul ecstatically chanting a devotional song suddenly stopped when he saw Baba approaching and exclaimed, you are the great avatar. Later, in parting from Baba, he declared, none here knows you, but I recognized you at once. In meeting you, my life's desire is fulfilled. Hail to God Vishnu. In each of these souls would recognize Baba as their own chosen manifestation of deity. Speaking of these outbursts of ecstasy on the part of these God lovers, Baba explained They feel happy with Baba because they see and know who Baba truly is, something which you, with a merely human eye, cannot see. The special eye which sees the divine form of Baba is quite distinct from the human eye. With your physical eyes, you see the playing of Maya, tables, chairs, couches. The internal eye sees through all of these things to God. Later, later he added, I love these lovers of God. They know nothing of the world. Even to their bodily needs, they are blissfully indifferent. When the whole world craves the playthings of illusion, while human beings rush at each other's throat for self gratification, these souls are absorbed in their love of God. Elizabeth Patterson, an American member of the party who traveled with Baba on these journeys, wrote that she had seen these weary, tortured souls leave Baba's presence after the symbolic bath with an unmistakable expression of regeneration upon their faces. They were like a garden of humanity, purified and shining after celestial rains. Through the touch of the Master, such joy was bestowed upon them that their expression of bliss could not be concealed. It radiated from every atom of their being. I take a pause here, Karthik, if you have any.
Yeah.
But you know what comes to my mind is that this is some sort of the symbolic bath is like a, and the way the master touches is a spiritual awakening.
True. Absolutely.
Continuing, like most journeys with the master, these extensive trips from east to west and from north to south of the vast continent of India were laden with diverse difficulties and delights. Ample were the opportunities of self sacrifice, and frequent were the moments of deepening love and veneration for the Master, to whom these men and women had dedicated their lives. Their faith, too, was strengthened as they witnessed the profound reverence with which these saintly souls accorded to Baba and observed how was unfailing was their instant recognition of his spiritual supremacy.
So that's the end of that section on the must journeys. Spiritual huntsman. I like that.
Spiritual?
Huntsman. That's what she called
Yes,
it. Yeah.
yes, yes. It really correlates with what we have also read uh, in discourses about divine love. The chapter
Yes.
on love is really nice.
Indeed.
Ashram on wheels. About 30 men and women, Eastern and Western, accompanied Baba on these journeys. A huge motor bus was especially designed to suit the requirements of the party, with a partition one or two seats in the back of driver's seat, forming a closed compartment for the Indian women who were still in relative seclusion. For the Indian men who are nothing if not vocal in their contacts with each other, this trip must have constituted a peculiar arduous discipline. In order to make sure that no male voice is heard by the little nuns, Baba instructed men not to raise their voices above a whisper when they were in the bus or within hearing distance of the Eastern women. All the luggage, which included pots and pans, stove and buckets for the ablutions of the mass, as well as 30 traveling bags and bedding rolls, was packed on top of the bus. The moment of departure in the six-wheel dinosaur always provided plenty of laughter and excitement for the party. Baba usually boarded the bus last after carefully supervising all the final details and made his way to the front of the car, which meant that the gangway seats could not, of course, be occupied until he had passed. With their camp stools pushed back, the occupants of the seats would stand to one side to make an aisle for Baba. The next moment he would snap his fingers, giving the signal to shut the door. Then, before the door was shut, he would tap on the window, motioning the driver to be off. As he speeds up the circumstances of daily life, he accelerates the consciousness of his disciples. These moments of departure always provided him with ample opportunity for this work of acceleration. Needless to say, he never lost an opportunity to bring to surface whatever latent shortcomings needed to be faced, or to drive home an overlooked truth. One of the group relates how she had occasion to wait in the car for a number of mornings at the same spot in a particular town. Each day, the same beggar, miserable and destitute, as only an Indian beggar can be, would come to her whining for alms. At first, she gave him something, but as his demands persisted, she became annoyed and pretended to be asleep when she saw him approaching. Later, when she told Baba of the annoying incident, she said, I don't know why she insists in coming to me every day. Looking at her seriously, Baba replied, he gets hungry every day. Some nights, after 300-mile journey, the group would find only an empty bungalow for the shelter. And if they were to make an early start in the morning, they would sometimes not even unroll their bedding, but would curl up in their coats on the hard floor or on the table or chairs if the bungalow provided these luxuries. The next night, perhaps, they would find themselves quartered in some Maharaja's place where they would luxuriate in soft beds. Thus, Baba
Maharaja's
weaned them
palace.
in some sorry, I'll read again. The
Yeah,
next
yeah.
night, perhaps, they would find themselves quartered in some Maharaja's palace where they would luxuriate in soft beds. Thus, Baba weaned them from the attachment to comfort or asceticism, from the likes and dislikes. Under ordinary conditions, such an ordeal might seem unsupportable, but with Baba as the guiding spirit, giving encouragement when it was needed, gently teasing to lift one into a lighter mood, the greatest hardship became embellished with beauty, the darkest moment transfigured by the divine radiation from the great heart of the Master. As Reno Gailey, one of the Western group who accompanied Baba on these tours, has expressed it, to love one has for Baba,
The loved one.
the love one has for Baba overcome all obstacles. To give up all for love of the Master is no hardship, for one gives up nothing and gains all. I think you can highlight this.
Yeah, I was just thinking exactly. You can actually read it again. It's a lovely
Yes,
line.
I was thinking like it's a lovely line. I'll read again. As Reno Gailey, one of the Western group who accompanied Baba on these tours, has expressed it, the love one has for Baba overcomes all obstacles. To give up all for love of the Master is no hardship, for one gives up nothing and gains all. Wow. Whirlwind trip. Baba's journeys, of which at least one object was the finding of God intoxicated souls, have continued through the years. He has declared it was necessary for him to contact at least 7 out of every 10 of these souls before he would break his sight and initiate his public work. You said something?
No, no.
This percentage has now been reached, which may be another indication that a long awaited world quickening may be imminent. These journeys have taken him.
I'm not sure I've encountered this before. I'm just marking it so that we
Yes, yes.
understand. Because did we come across that in Dawkins saying
No,
Baba wanted to hit 70% of the souls of this nature? I don't think so, right?
I also don't remember, but this is
Yeah.
really, yeah, it's got some
Again,
it's got some.
seven.
I'm
Again,
sorry.
seven comes out to play. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. The number seven comes out and it's got some definite spiritual significance. Seven is a very uh, significant number.
Yeah.
These journeys have taken him and his disciples many thousands of miles across desert and mountain. They have skirted dangerous jungles and forded turbulent streams. They have driven through torrential rains and under scorching sun, from the languorous beauty of Ceylon to the rugged majesty of the Himalayas. One whirlwind trip made by Baba and two of his disciples in search of these God exotic souls was particularly arduous. They covered 500 miles within 78 hours, during which time none of them slept nor bathed, and they ate but only one scanty meal a day. 5 days later, a similar trip was taken, but this one had the distinction of being made in a bullock cart. Such a mode of locomotion over the rough roads of India would have been difficult enough, but nature also provided to their discomfort by drenching them with rain and soaking their bedding beyond any possibility of use.
Wow.
The travails of searching for the God in toxic souls.
Yeah.
Rishikesh, abode of saints. Contrasted with such experience was the delight of which the group experienced in visiting Rishikesh. For centuries, the abode of saints and yogis. Baba led them to every nook and corner of the district, pointing out to them some of the more outstanding figures of spirituality among the many who make the mountain shrine their home. They visited one of the jungle retreats at the far end of the valley through which flows the torrent of the sacred Ganges. Suddenly, they came upon the immobile figure of a man standing naked in the stony river bed, with his face turned toward the sun. Paul explained that it was this man's function to perform this duty of establishing contact with the sun for 7 continuous days without changing his position. Even for 2 days, he is relieved. Then for two
Then for
days,
2 days. Yeah.
sorry, yes, then for 2 days, he's relieved by another advanced soul. In such ways, the spiritual titans of the world attune themselves to the laws of the cosmos and even aid in their direction. The saint gave the impression of a mighty oak tree whose topmost leaves gleam in sunlight and those powerful roots tunnel deep into the dark cavern of the earth. Later, they passed a forest where 10 advanced souls were taking turns in meditation. One of them sat covered with a long sheet, merged in his meditation and oblivious of outer things. Evidently, however, he felt the presence of divinity. For on the way back, as the group passed this shrouded figure, he sprang up from his coverings as Baba approached him and prostrated himself before the Holy One. One of the favorite places of pilgrimage in this section is the Great Mountain, reaching 18,000 feet into the region of eternal snow, where the Lord Krishna is reputed to have laid down his secret body. To this high level, dauntless pilgrims crawl and climb, many of them sacrificing their lives for the attainment of their goal. Only on the sacred soil of India can be found such passion for God, such willingness to sacrifice, which is generally considered to be his most prized possession, his physical life, for attainment of this supreme objective. And unique even in India is this section, Rishikesh. Here Baba says people come only to realize God. All lesser goals have been relinquished. This naturally endows it with one of the most spiritual atmospheres in the world. Wow. Seclusion ends. Throughout much of this period of travel, Baba was observing strict fasts and relative seclusion. seeing only those of his immediate group or the God in with whom he continued to work daily. Outer contact with his other devotees, who have always had comparatively free access to his presence, was curtailed shortly after his return to India in 1937. Even when he passed through towns or cities where some of his devotees lived, strict secrecy of his movements was observed. Then in March 1943 came word that he had ended his long period of seclusion. His re-entry into public life was marked by visits to three large towns, Sholapur, Parsi, and Akalkot. I think it can be Akolkot. Anyway,
Akalkot, yeah, it is Akalkot, yeah. Barsi, I don't know, but Sholapur and Akalkot.
yes. The news of his impending visits spread like bushfire, with the result that wherever he went, throngs of people were waiting to see or touch him, even if possible to obtain his blessings. At one city, the local traffic was so disorganized by 50,000 people clamoring to get near him that police had to call out reserves to handle the crowd which had organized itself into a singing procession with a band at its head as it led Baba through the town for 4.5 hours. Two amusing incidents are told of this trip. In one town, a man actually stole the sandals from Baba's feet. Fortunately, he had the forethought to bring new ones to replace those which he stole. In another place, Baba had to be literally rescued from the attentions of a violent admirer who, with tears streaming down his face, grabbed Baba and shook him. With such ardent fervor does the Indian mind sometimes react to saintliness. At the time of these public appearances, Baba had issued a few messages, giving the keynote of his world mission, which were read and distributed among the devotees. In the introductory one, he declared that it is time that man had a fresh vision of the truth that all life is one. T and one O is capital. God alone is worth living for, and God alone is worth dying for. All else is a vain and empty pursuit of illusory values. Perhaps you can uh, underline that God alone
Sure.
is worth living for, and God is worth dying for. All else is a vain and empty pursuit of illusory values. Wow. Another message which is concerned with the freedom of humanity, Baba stated that though the world is talking and fighting for various kinds of freedom, the basic freedom, the only one which has true value, is spiritual freedom. Even when all the external conditions of free life are completely fulfilled and guaranteed, the soul of man would remain in woeful bandage if it failed to realize spiritual freedom. One important condition of spiritual freedom is freedom from all wanting. It is desire that fetters life and enslaves the souls. When the soul breaks asunder the shackles of desire, it emancipates itself from its bondage to the body, mind, and ego. This is a spiritual freedom which brings with it the final realization of the unity of all life and puts an end to all doubts and worries. There is no gift greater than the gift of spiritual freedom, and there is no task more important than that of helping others to attain it. The time has come for all those who would help in the regeneration of man to offer their services in my mission of helping humanity tread the spiritual path which leads to the realization of God. Those who participate in this God willed, divinely planned, and predestined task of bringing spiritual freedom to mankind should know that every type of suffering and sacrifice, even to giving up the physical body, may be required of them. However, through their untiring activities, humanity shall be initiated into the new life of abiding peace and dynamic harmony, unconquerable faith and unfading bliss, immortal sweetness and incorruptible purity, creative love and infinite understanding. I read this again. However, through their untiring activities, humanity shall be initiated into the new life of abiding peace and dynamic harmony, unconquerable faith and unfading bliss, immortal sweetness and incorruptible purity, creative love and infinite understanding.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. It's got a lot of potential in what's written. Perhaps you can underline or highlight whatever.
Yeah, we can. Okay. With that, we end um, this chapter and go, I think, to what is chapter 9. Yeah, that chapter 9. So we can also rotate the reading. Hi, Ashish, how are you? You are in a
Hello.
position to read. You can read for a
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah. I can do it.
Hi Ashish, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
And
Jai
thank
Baba.
you. Thank you, Karthik.
Thank you so much, Ashok.
It's a delight.
Jai Baba.
Chapter
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Chapter 9, Prelude to Destiny. Tremendous as Baba's effect has been upon the lives of many thousands who have had a close inner or outer contact with him. His life activity so far has been largely preparatory, because his public manifestation, which many of us believe will substantiate his claims of avatarhood, is yet to begin. His claims of mastership can hardly be repudiated by any unprejudiced person who is
Unprejudiced person.
unprejudiced person who is acquainted with the facts of his life. And if we understand that the role of authorhood implies, we may see in many of these facts indications that this claim also is true. Since in the West we have no literature which deals with the concept of the avatar as the recurrent manifestation of godhood in human form. We must turn to the Bhagavad Gita, the great sacred classic of India, for enlightenment of this subject. Here we find a dramatic situation which is wholly analogous to the present condition of man. Then, as in our time, a dreadful war, as related to the Mahabharata, was destroying the old order with all its vices and virtues. Both individuals and nations had come to the place where all the intellectual, moral, and emotional values had collapsed, leaving man in a state of spiritual bankruptcy and utter bewilderment. bewilderment. The man of action, Arjuna, was asking himself, even as we are asking ourselves today, whether bloodshed ever achieved anything of lasting worth. Did it not perhaps merely help to keep the balance of power in the hands of one group of people or nations rather than in another? With Arjuna, however, directing the battle behind the scenes was the beloved friend and counselor Krishna, for whom Arjuna had the deepest love and respect. In his moment of utter frustration, hopelessness, and doubt of all his old values, he turns to his wise friend and guide, asking him for a clear rule of conduct by which he may confidently walk. This man, Arjuna, is the representative man of his age who has, like modern man, exiled God and spirituality
Spirituality.
in favor of ethical, social, and humanitarian ideals and practical reforms. Both individually and collectively, this man of the Gita and of today has reached the moment of his soul's greatest need when he must face his own inadequacy. Up to this time, Krishna's help was been largely that of spurring his friend on to disinterested action in defending his position against the opposing foe. The outer foe, who is, of course, but the objectification of the inner. But now, Arjuna, having reached the end of his own egoistic action, turns to Krishna in despair, pleading for his help. He begins to suspect that his beloved comrade is more than human friend, more than mere man. He implores him to show him his true form, the real nature. And because the soul of Arjuna, almost like that of modern man, has been sufficiently conditioned by suffering, because his egoistic self sufficiency has been punctured, Krishna consents to satisfy the soul's urgent desire. He reveals himself in his aspect of universal savior or avatar and proceeds now to guide Arjuna to the higher state of consciousness for which he knows him to be ready. In the person of Krishna, we find one in whom the eternal divine nature is fully conscious, one, therefore, who is fully aware of his destiny as the spiritual leader of mankind, and in that consciousness directs the destinies of men and nations. In his own right, as the incarnate God for the whole of humanity, not merely for a restricted group or of close disciples, he lifts the consciousness of the entire created world, for even the animals respond to the magic of his divine flute, the symbol of irresistible drawing power of God in the soul. Krishna also recognizes that his role of guide and awakener of the whole of life is one which he has always, since the dawn of humanity, fulfilled. Of this same consciousness, Baba has given countless indications, both in his dealing with people and by his own admission. Once, when questioner asked him how he knew that he was the Christ, he replied, I knew it before anything was, which is perhaps another way of saying, before Abraham was I am, or in the beginning was the world, and the world was with God, and the world was God. In the instruction,
One second,
yeah,
I think
yes,
these are all biblical terms which we are anyway used to,
yes.
but the more important one is the one Baba said, which is similar. One second.
Before Abraham was I am, or in the beginning was the world, and the world was.
Yeah. See
I
this.
knew
I knew it
it
before anything
before
was.
anything was, which is perhaps perhaps another way of saying, before Abraham was I am, or in the beginning was the world, and the world was with God, and the world was God. In the instruction which Krishna gives to the disciple Arjuna, he finds basically the same technique of life which Baba today gives to his 20th century disciples. At some stage of their inner unfoldment, he gives them a glimpse of his true nature and mission, and then encourages them to surrender themselves wholly to his will, his guidance. He teaches them how to live in the world, it not be of it, how to perform all action without regard for its fruits, by thinking of themselves as channels for the action of the divine being within. He gives them a new law of life by which action may be performed free of bondage, yet powerful enough to achieve the will of God or the avatar. He lifts them above the plane of opposites and its endless conflicts and perplexities into center of true knowledge, peace, and joy, the divine self. Also, like Krishna, Baba first leads the disciple as the beloved friend, father, comrade. Then, when the time is right, he reveals himself as the soul's savior, the immortal being who lives in the heart of every man, while at the same time he takes form as the human avatar. With Krishna, Baba says, Seek refuge in me, for you are very dear to me. I will realize you from all sin. Do not grieve, do not worry. Surely, today, as in that far off time of Krishna, we have reached an impasse in a man's development. Of himself alone, he seems powerless even to protect his physical existence. This is the psychological moment when man should and indeed must turn once against towards God for help. To the least mystical person, it should be apparent as it was to the pragmatist Arjuna that unless some divine means is found to enable man to transcend his greed, selfishness, and fear, this civilization will rapidly retrogress to the jungle state of consciousness or be totally destroyed by the pressure of button in the hands of man or nation gone berserk. War was obviously not taught us the lesson that mankind is one. War never teach that lesson. Only as individuals become aware of basic unity of all life will nation be able to cooperate in spirit of universal brotherhood and assure the further spiritual progress of mankind. Clearly, such a development in man's consciousness presupposes divine intervention of some sort, not by intellectual means, not by conscious willing, can man learn to love his fellow man regardless of color, creed, or nationality. For this, the constructive forces of the unconscious must be released. Fortunately for humanity, there is in the form of Meher Baba a divine force who has the power to arouse these latent powers of light. And what is more important, who has the authority to use that power as the testimony of many advanced souls and saints has corroborated in this his life story. Only the leader, the avatar, knows when the God force shall speak his word of power and effect for man his gravely needed spiritual awakening. We can, however, as tells us, speed its coming by surrendering ourselves wholly to the will of God, with the recognition that only divine aid will save mankind from total destruction. When humanity has come to the end of its own resources at the moment of its greatest need, then Baba says he will initiate his public work through the breaking of his silence. Wearing down the ego. This long silence, now in its 22nd year, has been enigma to many people, and his continual postponement of breaking it has proved a stumbling block to many others. So many times has he set the date for his speaking and then apparently changed his mind. The skeptical person assumes that Baba has lost his power of speech or that he is using his silence for a novel publicity stunt. Once in India, when I spoke to him about it, he said that from the outset he knew, of course, precisely how long he would remain silent, and he knew therefore that it would run into many years. Had he told his disciples in the early days how long it would be and how long, therefore, would be their period of probation, since their full-fledged discipleship depends upon his speaking. There would be many cases have lost heart, becomes too discouraged. So like
Jay Baba, I just want to ask this group, this Baba has been deferring his uh, speech, or he's remaining silent, and it's very enigmatic, uncertain. Is there some spiritual significance to his keeping silent? Because he said real uh, real words are given in silence. So he, of course, and it is written on his tomb that I have come here to awaken, not to teach. But is there uh, some specific spiritual reason why he's keeping silent? I would like to get enlightened.
So I think the heading nails it, right? The previous subheading was clear. Wearing down the ego. So
Ah, yes, yes.
his significance of the his silence, and the fact that he announced many times that he's going to break his silence, and then finally did
Postponed it.
not do that. Yeah, kept postponing it. Could be, I mean, we will never understand fully what the significance of that is, right? That's what I would say.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it has got definitely got some, you know, uh, it's a lesson for mankind that they have to mend their ways, earlier the better.
Yeah,
And I think in many religion, silence has a very big. It mentioned that it has a too much power in terms of
yes,
spiritual communication, inner work, sacrifices, and all for those stuffs. That I think it has huge importance in many religion about the
yeah,
silence.
correct,
Okay,
correct.
he led
Yes, you're
them.
right. You're right. There is also a period of fasting. They say that even keeping silent or moun is treated as a you know internal fasting.
Yeah, but it says, yeah, but how culture said, right? Baba spoke to him at the end.
Sorry,
What's that?
I didn't get that.
No, Bhau culture said, right? Baba spoke to him at his last time, something, right?
I'm not aware of it. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm also not aware of it, although I have met Bhau Kalchari in his last moments. He was very sick, but he did. But there are stories that he did feel the presence of Baba around him in his last
Okay.
moments. Yes, that is there. But about what Baba spoke to him, I am not aware of. So.
He had Yadrak. There was one statement, I think something Yadrak or something. That's what I heard.
Oh, is that that's
I think
worth?
so, yeah.
Yeah, it might be he has conveyed that to him in a whisper, or has conveyed to him on his gestures or whatever. But then, yeah, that is phenomenal.
Okay. So he led them on year by year, developing their capacity for patient waiting by promising them their release in a fragment of the time he knew his silence would have to last. The Baba's silence serves many purposes which lie beyond my present comprehension. One of them may be found in its effect upon the disciples, whom he is training to take their places as spiritual leaders in the world of tomorrow. One of the most outstanding features of Baba's technique with his disciples in the means he uses to develop their capacity to endure tension and to cultivate patience. Almost everything he does in relation to his circle in some way contributes to these basic requirements for psychological health and maturity. He first holds before one goal seemingly impossible to attain, certainly impossible by one's own unaided efforts. Then he promises it, but only at some hypothetical date when he breaks his silence. When he considers the dynamic power which he has, quickening consciousness and of intensifying longing for the infinite, and at the same time realize how he deliberately withholds that desirable goal, tan, 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 telling, tantalizingly just beyond one's reach. Always with the promise of tomorrow, next week, next year, it becomes clear how almost unbearable becomes the tension of waiting. Many people have, of course, refused to play his game by reacting negatively against him and by turning away. Their action is understandable, but there is also the constructive way of viewing this puzzling procedure. I
So
have come to realize that.
1 second, I'll just show you how this works. So this is the best word. This is the best word to describe what Baba is doing with breaking of silence. The torment or tease with the sight or promise of something unobtainable. A solution example of usage is solution seem tantalizingly close. The palace is tantalizingly hidden by trees. So I think this is what Baba is doing. Tantalizingly saying, I'm going to break my silence next week. I'm going to break my silence next year. I'm going to break my silence, arrange a program in Super Bowl. He did all of this, right? So very, I think the best word we should remember when it is his silence is tantalizing. Yeah. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, as you said, the wearing down of the ego, the time has not come down where there are more people with wearing down the egos than more people who are creating egos. Maybe that's the imbalance in the environment which we are having, and it is also manifesting itself in various climatic shifts, global warming, and many other incidents happening which are uh, you know unusual. Even COVID pandemic is a precursor of more tougher things to come, which is basically Baba's way. Baba has said that there is going to be Mahapralaya or something again, or if I remember correctly, there is going to be some real change happening.
Catastrophic events. Yeah.
Yes, catastrophic events. Yes, Jai Baba.
Okay. Yeah,
Jai Baba. Continue, Ashish. Jai Baba.
yeah. I have come to realize that through his unique strategy, Baba wears down the disciple's ego. At first, the disciple rebels against the prolonged delay in reaching his lofty goal. In his innermost self, he knows himself unfitted, unready at the time of such momentous step. But his accentuated desires fosters in him the belief that anything is possible. And Baba deliberately encourages his reaching for the stars. But as the years pass, Baba continues his silence while the disciple continues to wait. Little by little, the longing becomes cooled and latent. The ego becomes less demanding, more compliant with the exigencies of moment, more surrendered to the master's will. In this way, the disciple becomes more mature, riper for whatever unfoldment his soul is ready. As Dr. Fritz Kunkel says, in search of maturity, the most destructive feature of ego centricity is its rebellion against time. Complying with time means growing older and more mature, slowly and patiently. It requires creativeness or at least flexibility. Letting go. As the disciple becomes more mature, more fluid, as he learns to wait patiently but without any diminution of his spirit's intensity, he finally reaches the place where he lets go, abandons himself utterly to the will of God or the Master. His intensity of spirit is now turned to the consideration of the present moment. He accepts himself as he is now. He becomes aware of the wonderful potentialities of the present and ceases to focus his attention solely upon the future. The sugar plum which Baba has been dangling before his eyes no longer makes his mouth water and desire. is to intend upon finding spiritual meaning and value now. The task of assimilating the profound realizations which the master has stirred in him becomes an ever-present adventure of momentous importance. Gradually, his life becomes more deeply integrated, more consciously attuned to the heart and mind of the master. Since writing the above, I have found in some of Baba's recently received discourses confirmation of his intuition that for a time he deliberately fosters the attitude of mind which he would ultimately have the disciple transcend. transcend. In his article, The Infinity of Truth, he says, if truth were to be found only in the future and not in the past or present, it would not be infinite. It will automatically be limited as an event which has its origin in time. All that is inherent in life is deprived of its intrinsic significance if the present is regarded as merely a stepping stone to some far off attainment. This is definitely a false point of view. It is not right to deprive the present of all importance by subordinating it to an end of the future. It is only through a clear and tranquil mind that the true nature of spiritual infinity is understood to be something not to be attained in the future, but as what but as that which already has been, is and ever will be an eternal self-fulfillment. When every moment is rich with eternal significance, there is neither the tenacious clinging to the dead past, nor an expectant yearning for the future, but an integrated living in the eternal now. It has been my experience with the Master that in his dual intensification of feelings, tremendous yearning for God on the one hand, and a kind of divine despair on the other, he creates in one a longing to acute, so insupportable that one is finally compelled to let go. To the degree that we are able to do this without any egoistic thought intruding, we are aware of him, of reality, here and now, not in some far off day. Even if this blessed moment of clarified awareness is not the ultimate one, and we find ourselves again constrained to let go more spontaneously, we now find joy and interest in the process of stripping off the veils of illusion which cloud our apprehension the truth. Should Baba tell his disciples his fundamental fact before they have experienced it for themselves, he would belie his role as a supreme psychologist. He knows that a condition must be created in the depths of man's soul that will cause his whole being, both conscious and unconscious level of his mind, the full battery of his emotional nature to revolt against all self-imposed limitations and then to let go and let God take over. Merely to understand this truth intellectually would, at best, effect but temporarily and partial release. Only a profound need can give one the necessary incentive to face and accept oneself as one now is, unadorned, unashamed. This need Baba certainly creates. His teaching or way of life is basically the same as teaching of Zen Buddhism, as it is essentially the same with all true teaching, whatever the religious approach to God. Confirmation of this is found in Alan Watts' The Meaning of Happiness, in which he describes the essence of Zen as total acceptance, which seems to be response to bondage, is actually key to freedom. For when you accept what you are now, you become free to be what you are now. And this is why the fool becomes sage when he lets himself be free to be full.
Yeah.
Karthik, that you can possibly underline that. I think it's quite significant, although it's by another author, but It's got significant.
Yeah. Total acceptance, which seems to be a response to bondage, is actually a key to freedom. For when you accept what you are now, you become free to be what you are now. And this is why the fool becomes a sage when he lets himself be free to be a fool. There was another quotation which I found very interesting. This is, of course, straight from Discourses, but there was a Fritz Kunkel. Yeah, this one.
The most destructive feature.
Yeah. This is also this is something we have to meditate upon, right?
I just read it.
Ego, yeah, the most destructive feature of egocentricity, I'll read again. The most destructive feature of egocentricity is its rebellion against time. Complying with time means growing older and more mature, slowly and patiently. It requires creativeness or at least flexibility. So he's linking our obsession with ego or reliance to ego with the concept of not accepting the fact of time, right? Which is amazing, something to think about. So which is what she brings out beautifully in this paragraph, which is the infinity of truth from Discourses, which we obviously relate to. Anyway, by the way, I can rotate the reading if you want, Ashish, and take over at this time and read.
Okay. Okay.
Jai Baba.
Yeah.
Master psychotherapist. Someone has recently said that the new Messiah, when he comes, will have to be a master psychologist. And those who know him best would certainly place Baba in this category. He who have been closely, we who have been closely associated with him recognize that his technique with souls include the best which psychotherapy has to offer, but also that it goes far beyond it. He does not, for example, need to know a person's dreams to become acquainted with the state of the dreamer's unconscious. Nor does Baba need recourse to any technique of free association to discover the stumbling blocks on the disciple's road to a free and more abundant life. With a supranormal insight, he sees not only what in this life has bound the individual soul, but what in past lives has contributed to his present degree of unfoldment or retardment. Moreover, he avoids the pitfall which besets many analysts of knowing better how to break down the personality than to release the soul. For at each stage on the way to individuation, Baba both integrates the true individuality and destroys the egoistic factors which blind the soul to its real nature. With consummate skill, he takes one to the breaking point, but never a hair's breadth beyond. With consummate skill, he takes one to the breaking point, but never a hair's breadth beyond. Very nice. Modern psychology, writes Baba, has done much to reveal the sources of conflict, but on the whole, it has yet to discover the methods of awakening inspiration or supplying the mind and heart with something dynamic which makes life worth living. This indeed is the creative task before the saviors of humanity. Unequivocally, he states that the cause of man's suffering and unhappiness is this egoistic outlook upon life. This must, therefore, be dissolved. Man will again and again be dislodged from his illusory shelters by fresh and irresistible waves of life, and he will invite upon himself fresh forms of suffering by seeking to protect his separative existence through escape. But life cannot be permanently imprisoned within the cage of the ego. It must at some time aspire toward the truth. In the rightness of evolution, the momentous discovery is made that life cannot be understood and lived fully as long as it is made to move around the pivot of the ego. Man is therefore driven by the logic of his own experience to find the true center of experience and reorganize his life on the basis of the truth which he discovers there. He points the way to the solution in these words. If consciousness is to be emancipated from its limitations and made to serve the original purpose for which it came into existence, which is to realize God, it must draw its directive momentum not from the ego but from some other principle. The ego as a nucleus of integration must be renounced and a new center found. In the same sense in which Jesus said, I am the way, Baba says that the perfect master, whose consciousness is one with God, becomes the new center of integration for the disciple who gives him his wholehearted allegiance. Since the master is a living affirmation of the unity of all life, allegiance to him gradually dissolves the separative propensities of the ego. Baba makes it clear that in surrendering to the master, the disciple surrenders to the embodiment of infinite and universal truth, not to another limited finite ego. The disciple's consciousness, therefore, is freed from its bondage of ignorance instead of being further bound, as would be the case if he became identified with another finite mind. Why is the perfect master important? It's a beautiful paragraph. When the ego disappears, there arises the knowledge of the true self. One's consciousness is then that of the eternal and infinite I am, in which there is no separateness and which includes all life. Baba is, however, fully aware of the deep rooted difficulties attendant upon this renunciation of the ego as the center of life and action. By some means, the aspirant must find a way to act without any sense of I do this or I do that. Yet, he must also avoid the extreme of utter passivity. A way must be found by which he may carry on a life of creative action, yet not be caught upon in the bonds of the ego life. To avoid
Karthik,
inaction,
can you read the last paragraph again, or maybe afterwards you can do it? But it's really nice. The last paragraph. Yeah, this one
I,
in the same sense.
I'd love to read it again. In the same sense in which Jesus said, I am the way, Baba says that the perfect master, whose consciousness is one with God, becomes the new center of integration for the disciple who gives him his wholehearted allegiance. Since the master is a living affirmation of the unity of all life, allegiance to him gradually dissolves the separative propensities of the ego. Baba makes it clear that in surrendering to the master, the disciple surrenders to the embodiment of infinite and universal truth, not to another limited finite ego. The disciple's consciousness, therefore, is freed from its bondage of ignorance instead of being further bound, as would be the case if he became identified with another finite mind. When the
Beautiful.
ego
Thank you.
disappears, when the ego disappears, there arises the knowledge of the true self. One's consciousness is then that of the eternal and infinite I am, in which there is no separateness and which includes all life. Baba is, however, fully aware of the deep rooted difficulties attendant upon this renunciation of the ego as the center of life and action. By some means, the aspirant must find a way to act without any sense of I do this or I do that. Yet he must also avoid the extreme of utter passivity. A way must be found by which he may carry on a life of creative action, yet not be caught up in the bonds of the ego life. To avoid inaction on the one hand and the pride of action on the other, Baba says that it is necessary for the spiritual aspirant to construct a provisional and working ego which will be entirely subservient to the master. This is what exactly I was thinking when she was talking about this, right? So, yeah. Before beginning anything, the aspirant should think that it is not he who is doing it, but the master who is working through him. And when the work is finished, he should not claim or enjoy the fruits of the activity, but relinquish them by offering them to the master. By training his mind in this spirit, the aspirant creates a new ego, which, though provisional, imparts the feeling of confidence and enthusiasm and possesses the motive power which true action must express. Since, however, this ego derives its life and being from the master who represents infinite freedom, it is harmless and can, when the right moment comes, be discarded like a garment. The construction of such an ego, which is entirely subject to the master, is indispensable in the dynamics of spiritual advancement. By the way, coincidentally, tomorrow we take up the theme of ego. Such merging of the disciple with the master should not be confused with idolatry, which often arises in relationships where one party seems to embody many of the other's unconscious and therefore unexpressed qualities. These projections, though for a time they may induce a temporary expansion of consciousness, are not conducive to freeing the person from his limited ego life. That Baba is fully aware of this danger of becoming identified with a secondary finite center is revealed in his words. When we become identified with a narrow group or section of life, or with some limited ideal or person, we do not experience a real merging of the separative self, but only a pseudo merging. The real merging of the limited self in the ocean of universal life involves complete surrender of all separate existence in all its forms. The final and complete surrender to the master is identical with the relinquishment of all segregated consciousness and leads inevitably to the attainment of truth, which is the ultimate goal of all spiritual life. For those whose needs compels them to find the true center of integration in themselves, this linking of their consciousness with that of the master provides the swiftest and surest means towards their goal. This should not be misinterpreted to mean that such a devotee makes no effort on his own part. It is true that he does not strive for any specific psychic attainment or degree of initiation such as occult teaching offers to its students. He does, however, seek constantly in his meditations and daily life to become more deeply attuned to his master's consciousness, that central sun of divine love, whose radiant warmth melts the frozen shell of all egocentric consciousness. The disciple's attitude towards his master is not one of unconscious projection, but conscious introversion. The saintly woman Rabia of Sufi fame has said that if God shall turn towards us, we will turn towards him. Thus, the disciples turning inward is in reality the activity of the master, which is like a mighty undertow of the spirit, drawing the disciples' consciousness into the pivotal point of his being. Baba's method of dealing with the well-known inferiority and superiority complexes shows how almost simultaneously he destroys the false personality and rebuilds the true nature of the disciple. In order to bring about a rapid dissolution of the two chief ego masks, inferiority and superiority, the master deliberately stirs both of these complexes alternately. If the disciple is on the verge of losing heart and giving up the spiritual search, he may arouse in him deep self confidence. If he is on the verge of being unduly egoistic, Baba may break through this facade by creating situations in which the disciple is compelled to accept and recognize his own incapacity or futility. Thus, the master wields his influence over the disciple to expedite the stages through which the melting ego must pass before its final disintegration. Nor does Baba exclude the spiritual ego from the need for dissolution. When the ego is overpowered by a flood of spiritual notions and actions, it is just as binding as the more crude ego, which makes no lofty spiritual pretensions. Spiritual ego is equally dangerous. Spiritual dynamite. There are those who say that Baba is dangerous, and they are right. He is spiritual dynamite in the soul of anyone who comes under his influence. He catapults him out of his protective shell. He demolishes carefully erected entrenchments of pride and self complacency. He explodes pet prejudices and opinions. He shocks one out of one's virtues just as surely as he reveals one's innermost sins. Not a comfortable procedure by any means, but one which ultimately lifts the personality from its self imposed serfdom into the untrammeled life of the heaven born. In the Master's words, you yourself are the cause of your separation from the beloved. Annihilate what is called yourself, and you will thereby gain union with him, the true self. Illustrative illustrative of the loose rope method which he advocates to for his followers was his reply to a questioner who thought that belief was something which could be coerced. Always do what you feel like doing. If today you feel like believing in me, in God, do so. And if tomorrow you feel the reverse, don't believe. To the critic who passes judgment upon the unconventional outlook and life of the truly great teachers who cut through the enclosure of man's artificial standards of conduct, he says, many conventions express and embody illusory values since they have come into existence as a result of the working of the mass mind, which is spiritually ignorant. The freedom from convention, which often appears in life of the spiritual aspirant or master, is due not to any willful rebellion against conventional standards or superficial approach to life, but to the exercise of discriminating thought. Those who would transcend the life of conformity to an external code of morals and conduct and experience the inner world of reality must develop the capacity to distinguish between false and true values, irrespective of man made conventions. Though such intelligent discrimination is of utmost importance, the newly perceived values become fruitful only when they are lived out in daily practical life. Brilliant quotes, brilliant examples, and this is the gem of a chapter. They must be acted upon.
Definitely. It's really, it's power packed potential.
Yeah. They must be acted upon, made creative. It is not theory, but practice which counts in the spiritual life. Such precepts and practice would naturally subject Baba to the criticism that he and his teaching are dangerous. The deeper secrets of the spiritual life, he declares, are unveiled to those who take risks and who make bold experiments with life. They are not intended for the weak-kneed who seek guarantees for every step. He who, from the shore, speculates about the ocean shall know only its surface. If he would know the depths of the ocean, he must be willing to plunge into it. Right? Again, beautiful lines. If this is dangerous, it is also profound wisdom and leads to the state of consciousness in which the lover loses himself in the being of the beloved and knows that he is one with the infinite. The key. It is this transcendent life which Baba would share with mankind when it is ready to receive it. Love, he writes, holds the key to all problems. Inasmuch as under the law of love, the infinite is realized completely for all time in every walk of life, in science, art, religion, or beauty. He adds that this downpouring of eternal love will be released upon humanity when it reaches the spiritual turning point. Everyone, regardless of his former outlook, will participate in the new life current. Even materialistic people will be affected by the profound stirring of consciousness which will then take place. He recommends, however, as a wise preparation to those living in the world and sharing the worldly viewpoint, that they attend to their worldly life and duties as usual, but at certain times each day, they should long for something beyond material life. This will gradually detach them from dependence upon material things and prepare them to receive the higher vibration of divine love. To those for whom some form of art is their yoga, Baba explains that art is one of the great avenues through which the soul expresses itself and inspires others. But to express art clearly, one must have his deeper emotions thoroughly released. Love your art, and that art will be open for you the inner life. Love your art, and that art will open for you the inner life. When you paint, for example, you forget everything except your painting. When you're keenly concentrated upon it, you're lost in it. And when you're lost in it, your ego diminishes. Love infinite appears. And when such love is experienced, God is attained. So you see how art can lead one to find the infinite. The greatest mystics of all time have been in complete accord with the viewpoint that through love, God is most readily and perfectly known. In our own time and country, William Jeffreys, a great mystic, now on the other side, writes, in the final step, which is union, God reveals himself in his ultimate nature to those who love him. And God is only completely known in his supreme character, love. In his When Words Become Life, he also states, furthermore, every step, every act, every moment of fellowship between one person and another in any field of life brings nearer the day when the whole race will know God as he is. We talk a lot about creeds and life. There is an underlying unity in which one may say that all creeds will find their union at last in living love. It is, as St. Paul says, the thing which will last forever. Core of Baba's teaching. To bring about such a living synthesis of all religions is Baba's avowed purpose. He does not seek to convert mankind to a new religion. He does, however, intend to quicken in man the experience of reality, which is the basis of all true religion. He sums up briefly his purpose in these words: I shall bring together all religions and cults like beads on one string and revitalize them for individual and collective needs. That it is the essence of religion and not the crystallized form which he will revivify is exemplified by his statement that it is time that religion goes and God comes. Apparently, religion is to transcend its spirit of exclusiveness, even as races and nations will. Once, when Baba, Once, when asked whether he believes that Jesus the Christ was the one and only unique prophet, Baba replied, unique indeed from the standpoint of his state of consciousness, but not the only one. Each religion claims this for its leader, but making such claims does not help you to know Christ. To know him, one has to live his life. All are Christ, but very few can become Jesus. The above statement contains the core of Baba's teaching and the essence of his life. He comes to make man aware of his Christhood. He comes to free man from his bondage to self and lift him to a higher plane of being. He comes to demonstrate anew God's love for his children by making himself the living way. For those who have the spiritual capacity to recognize him, for spiritual perfection can only be spiritually discerned, he represents the highest each one is capable of realizing. The eternal Christ comes to us throughout the ages as the living embodiment of the personal aspect of God, and it is with this human manifestation of God that we must make contact if we would enter fully into his impersonal and universal aspect. Something of this thought must have been in Jesus' mind when he asked, how can you love the Father whom you have not seen if you cannot love me whom you have seen? Beautiful line again, right? This perfect one incarnated originally in the primitive days of man's earth life and will continue to incarnate so long as the evolutionary process requires periodical quickening of consciousness through the physical presence on earth of the avatar. This one manifests each time in a wider synthesis of perfection, always the same supreme master of his age, always the same divine awakener of souls. What else could Jesus himself have meant when he said that he would come again? By the way, I think we just reached our time deadline, but I think we'll just finish the 3-4 pages that are there. Yeah. So that we
Yeah,
can start
that's
a
a good.
next.
Yes, we should finish the 3-4 pages.
Yeah. There are those who say that he did not mean that he would come again in a physical body, but merely in the hearts of men. But how shall those hearts be awakened to receive his exquisite vibration unless he comes again in person to recharge the rundown battery of human consciousness? Can we honestly say that the church, his supposed channel, is making the hearts of men more selfless, purer, more filled with the love of God and his creatures? Our greed, the lust for power, the warfare between groups and nations, evidences of his sublime spirit? Have the heads of the church been able to turn the tide of the recent devastation, uh, the devastating holocaust of self destruction? Even the most purblind among us will recognize that today many needs desperately that I think it's man. Even the most purblind among us will recognize that today man needs desperately a great spiritual catalyst if he has to be saved from his own folly and ignorance. What is purblind? Oh, sorry. Okay, purblind just means blind. Dim-witted also. Spiritual powerhouse. Perhaps the most striking indication of Baba's power to change the consciousness of mankind is revealed by those who have not yet had the opportunity of meeting him in the flesh, but whose lives have been transformed by his quickening spirit. Of the many stories which might be told of his influence upon those who have not met him outwardly, few better illustrate the potency of his appeal than the experience of a violinist in one of America's most outstanding symphony orchestras. A friend, Frederick, who himself had been deeply stirred by inner contact with Baba, was sitting on the beach at Carmel, California, one brilliant afternoon at sundown. Though profoundly moved by the glory of the sunset and wishing only to merge in its beauty, he felt strongly impelled to speak to a man who sat near him on the sand. As they talked, Frederick discovered that the man was under a severe mental and emotional strain, the exact nature of which he did not disclose. Perhaps, thought Frederick, a booklet which he carried in his pocket, Silent Revelations of Meher Baba, would meet the man's need. Though reluctant to relinquish it, he offered it to him as they parted. They were to meet the next afternoon at the same place, but when the hour arrived, the man was nowhere to be seen. nor was he at the Carmel address which he had left with Frederick. My friend was puzzled and determined to look him up in Los Angeles when he returned there the following week. By happy coincidence, the orchestra in which the man was a violinist was giving a performance the same evening that Frederick arrived in town. Purchasing two tickets, he and a friend found their way into front balcony seats. During a particular number, the concertmaster arose to play a solo part. It was the man from Carmel, and he played as one aflame with inspiration. The house burst into a torrent of applause as the man finished. Frederick wondered at the change from the desperately crushed individual who had talked with him at the seaside to this dynamic creative artist. When 2 days later they had dinner together, the man told him this story. Though by virtue of his skill and artistry he had earned for himself the place of first violinist in this great orchestra, it had been some years since the conductor had commended him as he did others for any of his performances. The man knew that some vital spark was missing, and he was at a loss to know how he could generate it. He had been brooding over it for months until that day on the beach at Carmel he had come to the breaking point. Suicide was the only way out for him, he had decided. But that evening, after the encounter with Frederick, he opened Baba's little book with the photograph of the master on the frontispiece. In a flash, a current of light seemed to penetrate his innermost being. He was instantly healed of his desperate resolution, and the next morning returned to the city to resume practice with the orchestra. The solo part which had been assigned to him and which had precipitated the crisis, he now knew that something he would perform creditably. Little did he realize, however, that God would take over and play through him. He states that he was aware continually of the sustaining power of the master during the practice days which followed. And when he arose to play his solo at the concert, he could see nothing but Baba's luminous face before his eyes. His whole being seemed illumined by the master's consciousness. A wellspring of emotion and power, such as he had never before experienced, was released in him and poured out through his sensitive fingers and through his equally sensitive Stradivarius in such richness of tone and depth of feeling that it penetrated to the heart of every one of his listeners, judging from their tremendous spontaneous ovation. After the concert, the conductor looked at him in puzzled wonderment as he heartily commended him for his superlative performance. But the man was still looking into Baba's eyes, feeling the embrace of his presence. He needed now no other assurance. Anybody knows this person's name? It's a very beautiful episode. Anyway, Prodigal's Return. In attempt to review Baba's redeeming activity in my own life, I find that it falls into two main categories: a cleansing, purging process, which has entailed ruthless self facing and profound changes in mind and body, and a gradual release from constricting habits of thought and emotion until now a widespreading clarity and peace permeate my consciousness. For a woman who had loved much, whose emotional nature largely controlled her life, to find herself now free of that emotional bondage, yet loving more deeply, more honestly, is an achievement possible only under the guidance of a supreme master of the soul. If, in addition, such a woman has, through the master's grace, been guided out of weakness into strength, out of timidity and self consciousness into God assurance and greater power of life expression, then she knows how merciful has been the Master's activity in her life. If she has become more, if she has become aware of blinding veils being lifted in her consciousness, of joy which is unmarred by the pinpricks of daily life, of love which is independent of persons flooding her soul, then she knows even more deeply how true has been her lifelong intuition that it was her destiny to meet again the Christ in the flesh and to become his disciple. In earlier days, when my life was passing through a maze of kaleidoscopic experiences, so varied, rapid, and apparently unrelated, I found it impossible to discover any dominant pattern in it. Again and again, the pendulum swung from the sunlit mountain top to the darkest valley, both experiences being apparently beyond my conscious control. With Baba's coming, however, consciousness tended more and more to converge toward the midpoint of balance. No longer is life lived at the extremes, with transports of joy today and chasms of anguish tomorrow. What formerly seemed like a crazy piece of patchwork is now revealed to me as a life pattern of tremendous contrasts, held together by the cohesive power of the Master, who, long years before I met him outwardly, had been guiding my life and destiny behind the scenes. I am inwardly aware that the supernal glimpses of reality which came to me from time to time were gifts from the altar room of the Master's consciousness by which my soul was wooed to return homeward. Steadily, surely, the divine magnet has been drawing me closer to himself in order he may use me in this life and throughout eternity for his own needs. Through dark days and light, through weakness and strength, through imperfect forms of love, and through divine yearning, he has guided my footsteps lovingly, strongly, patiently, until now my pathway to his heart is clear of rubble and waste. William Blake sums up in a few lines what I have come to regard as the only possible attitude of the disciple toward the redemptive work which the Master effects in him. I will go down to annihilation and death, lest the last trump sound and find me unannihilate, and I be given into the judgment of mine own soul. I will go down to annihilation and death, lest the last trump sound and find me unannihilate, and I be given into judgment of mine own soul. All souls, whether they are conscious of it or not, are seeking God. To aid them in their search, the Master Baba now comes as the perfect manifestation of that love and wisdom for which the human soul yearns. His words illumine the way. The sojourn of the soul is a thrilling divine romance in which the lover, who in the beginning is conscious of nothing but emptiness, frustration, superficiality, and the abrasive chains of bondage, gradually attains an increasingly fuller and freer expression of love. Ultimately, his separate self disappears as it merges into the divine beloved. In this unity of the lover and the beloved is realized the supreme and eternal fact of God as infinite love. Amazing last chapter, right? And thanks for staying back and helping finish, though we slipped over our time schedule. Hi, Sunil. How are you?
Hey,
Jai Baba.
that's good. Karthik, you can highlight the last paragraph also.
Sure, sure.
Jai Baba, Sunil.
Jai
I-
Baba, Jai Baba.
If we read it again, if you don't mind.
The sojourn of the soul is a thrilling divine romance in which the lover, who in the beginning is conscious of nothing but emptiness, frustration, superficiality, and the abrasive chains of bondage, gradually attains an increasingly fuller and freer expression of love. Ultimately, his separate self disappears as it merges into the divine beloved. In this unity of the lover and the beloved is realized the supreme and eternal fact of God as infinite love. Beautiful.
Beautiful. And it reminds me that essay, the first essay, The Lover and the Beloved,
Absolutely. Yeah.
which Dr. Kama mentions very often.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, I will stop recording. And thanks very much for staying over and listening. Extending the reading. Let me stop there. So